Standing here in front of Red Lady Bowl. This was the site of a skier-triggered avalanche on Sunday, December 18th. What you had here is we had a group of 4 skiers descended the bowl in the middle of the day. Nothing happened, and then a couple hours later in the afternoon, a solo skier came in and entered about 50 yards to the looker's right.
You can see the 4 sets of tracks on the left, and the 5th track, which came through the cliff band on the right, ultimately triggered a very large D3 avalanche.
So the first group up dug a pit right up here, and they reported getting stable results. The thing about these persistent slabs is they're tricky. You're not always going to get direct, but it's important to look at the big picture of things.
Look at the avalanche danger rating. Look at the distribution of where you can find the problem. Look at recent avalanche activity. Sometimes collapses or propagating test results can clue you into dangerous conditions, but sometimes their absence doesn't mean that the slope is stable. Tracks on a slope are not an indicator of stability for persistent slab avalanches. We're talking about a weak layer that's buried anywhere from 2 to 6 feet deep, and we can have numerous people cross the slope without initiating a collapse. All it takes is one person finding that shallow spot on the slope. Maybe it's a rock that's buried a few inches deep. Maybe it's a thin spot on the slab. All it takes is that one person to initiate a collapse and bring down the whole entire slope. We measured the left side of this crown to be almost 1,500 feet wide. This isn't unusual for persistent slab avalanches to carry really wide propagation.
So this slope was dirt in November. Then we started to get a little bit of snow in mid-November, and it formed weak layers in the bottom of the snowpack as that stuff faceted away. Then we started getting a load early December. Then we got that huge storm. In 36 hours, we got about 3 inches of water on this spot, not counting the wind loading. You add wind loading, that's a huge rapid load on a weak layer at the bottom. That's why we're seeing widespread natural avalanches during that cycle, and that's why this slope is unstable. Here's our weak layer here. This is a shallow spot right next to the rocks. You couldn't see this rock if you were looking down on the slope. You would have no way of knowing that the weak layer right here is 6 inches deep, but you could collapse the weak layer here. It definitely would be harder to collapse in some of those other areas where the slab is a lot thicker. But that's the problem. There's variable slab thickness here. We know the weak layer is there. It's just a matter of finding this spot on the slope and getting it to collapse.
You can trigger the slope from below you. You can trigger it remotely. These persistent slab avalanches are the leading cause of fatalities in Colorado, and for good reason. They're really tricky to assess, especially in the Alpine, where winds create an uneven distribution of weak layers and slabs. This avalanche was triggered the day after we lifted an avalanche warning, and the avalanche danger was rated considerable. We rate the avalanche danger on a sliding scale, and there are some days where you're more likely to trigger an avalanche, or the expected size is much larger and more dangerous, or both. The upper pitches of Red Lady Bowl range from 35 to 45 degrees in steepness. These are the prime suspect slope angles for triggering an avalanche. When we forecast for dangerous avalanche conditions or tricky avalanche problems, you can always opt for lower angle terrain, slopes less than about 30 degrees. Look at how far the avalanche debris ran. We've probably all stopped on one of those rollovers at the bottom of the bowl and watched our buddy ski down to us. On some days this is appropriate if we're expecting small avalanche problems such as storm slabs or wind slabs. If you're traveling in avalanche terrain, having someone watch from a safe zone really reduces your vulnerability if you get caught. They can initiate a rescue, they can dig you out, or they can call 911 to get help on the way. This was a powerful slide. It snapped trees, and getting carried through that type of terrain would have likely resulted in some pretty traumatic injuries. But you would have zero chance of surviving a burial if you're skiing by yourself. Partner rescue is really your only chance of survival in an avalanche. We're all very grateful that that swath of snow in the middle of the bowl didn't slide. But there's no positive reason that we can explain it. And there's plenty of evidence from previous years that that piece of terrain does and will slide again in the future. We are very grateful that this eye-opening event resulted in just a close call and nothing more. And we hope that people can use it as a learning opportunity for the future.
Every night I could never place a star that night, but got my hand